Story 6 with Salamanca. They called it unsinkable, the safest ship ever built. On its very first voyage, in the middle of a freezing ocean, something was waiting in the dark. In less than 3 hours, more than 1,500 people would be dead. In April 1912, the RMS Titanic left the port of Southampton, England, on its very first journey. It was the largest moving object ever built by human hands. At more than 269 meters long, it carried over 2,200 passengers and crew, from wealthy families in first class to poor immigrants hoping for a new life in America. The ship belonged to the White Star Line, and its builders were proud of one claim above all others. They said Titanic was practically unsinkable. Its hull was divided into 16 watertight compartments. Even if several of them flooded, the ship would supposedly stay afloat. The captain, Edward Smith, was one of the most experienced officers at sea. This voyage was meant to be his final crossing before retirement. Nobody on board imagined it would also be his last. Titanic sailed confidently into the Atlantic Ocean, heading toward New York. For 4 days, everything seemed perfect. The passengers dined in grand rooms, walked on polished decks, and admired a ship that felt more like a floating palace than a vessel crossing dangerous winter waters. But somewhere ahead of them, in the cold darkness of the North Atlantic, ice was drifting south. And the crew was about to make a series of decisions that history would never forget. By the 4th day at sea, the temperature had dropped sharply. The air felt colder, and the ocean around Titanic had entered a region known for dangerous ice. Throughout the day, other ships in the area sent warnings by wireless radio. Several vessels reported large icebergs and fields of ice directly in Titanic's path. These messages arrived one after another, hour after hour. But the radio room on Titanic was extremely busy. The wireless operators were mostly occupied sending personal messages for wealthy passengers, who were eager to communicate with friends and family on land. Some ice warnings were received and passed along. Others were delayed, or never reached the bridge at all. Captain Smith did adjust the ship's course slightly to the south, a common precaution. But he did not reduce Titanic's speed. The ship continued forward at nearly 22 knots, close to its maximum speed, through a night that was becoming dangerously clear and calm. A calm sea might sound safe. In fact, it was the opposite. Without waves breaking against the base of an iceberg, there would be no white foam to warn the lookout. In perfectly still water, an iceberg could appear silently, almost invisible, until it was far too close. At 11:40 in the evening, high in the crow's nest, lookout Frederick Fleet stared into the darkness ahead. And then he saw something enormous rising out of the black water, directly in front of the ship. Frederick Fleet rang the warning bell 3 times and telephoned the bridge immediately. "Iceberg, right ahead," he said. The officer on duty, First Officer William Murdoch, reacted at once. He ordered the ship to turn hard and told the engine room to reverse the engines. For a few seconds, it seemed like Titanic might avoid the collision entirely. But the ship was enormous, and it was moving fast. Even a small delay in a turn this size made a critical difference. Titanic did not hit the iceberg head-on. Instead, its side scraped along the ice, below the waterline, where nobody could see the damage. Many passengers barely noticed anything. Some felt a slight shudder. A few heard a strange scraping sound. In the first-class lounge, some people kept playing cards, assuming nothing serious had happened. But below decks, the truth was very different. The impact had torn open several compartments along the ship's side. Water began pouring in, fast and unstoppable. Titanic's builders had said the ship could survive 4 flooded compartments and still float. The iceberg had damaged 5, and possibly 6. Within minutes, engineers inspecting the lower decks understood something the passengers upstairs did not yet know. The unsinkable ship was going to sink. It was no longer a question of if. It was only a question of how much time they had left. Just after midnight, Captain Smith gave the order that confirmed everyone's worst fear. Uncover the lifeboats. Prepare to evacuate. And this is where Titanic's story reveals its most devastating detail. The ship carried 20 lifeboats. Together, they had space for only about 1,178 people. Titanic was carrying more than 2,200. The ship had actually followed the safety regulations of the time, which were dangerously outdated. The rules calculated lifeboat numbers based on a ship's weight, not on how many people it carried. Titanic technically had more lifeboats than the law required. It simply was not enough to save everyone on board. On deck, confusion spread quickly. Many passengers did not believe the ship was truly sinking. Some refused to leave the warmth of the grand staircase for a small lifeboat in the freezing night. Early boats were lowered only partly full. Crew members followed the tradition of the sea, women and children first. In first class, most women and children survived. In third class, many passengers were farther from the boat deck, and some later testified that gates and stairways were harder to pass through during the chaos. As the front of the ship sank lower, the tilt became impossible to ignore. Furniture slid across rooms. Water rushed through hallways. The ship's lights, extraordinarily, stayed on for most of the disaster, powered by engineers who remained below decks even as the water rose around them. Then, at around 2:20 in the morning, Titanic's bow dipped fully underwater. The stern rose high into the night sky. And the ship that had been called unsinkable broke apart and disappeared beneath the Atlantic Ocean. For the more than 1,500 people left in the freezing Atlantic water, survival was almost impossible. The ocean temperature was close to freezing. Most people in the water died within minutes, not from drowning, but from the cold itself. Nearby, in the lifeboats, survivors listened to the sounds of hundreds of people crying for help in the darkness. Only a small number of lifeboats went back to search for survivors. Most stayed away, afraid that swimmers would climb aboard and capsize the boat. Hours later, the rescue ship RMS Carpathia arrived and pulled more than 700 survivors from the lifeboats. But one uncomfortable question would haunt the story for generations. Was there a ship close enough to help sooner? Investigators later focused on a vessel called the SS Californian, which had stopped for the night in ice fields not far from Titanic. Crew members on the Californian reported seeing distant flares in the sky. Titanic's crew had fired distress rockets, the standard signal for a ship in danger. Why the Californian did not respond in time remains disputed. Some believe the ship's radio operator was asleep and never received Titanic's distress calls. Some believe the officers on watch misunderstood the flares or hesitated to act. The full truth has never been completely settled. When formal inquiries began in both the United States and Britain, investigators uncovered a larger truth. Titanic's disaster was not caused by one single mistake. It was the result of many decisions, made by many people, none of whom expected the worst outcome. Ignored warnings, excessive speed, outdated lifeboat regulations, a calm sea that hid the danger. Together, these choices created a tragedy that seemed almost impossible to imagine beforehand. The sinking of the Titanic changed maritime law forever. In the years that followed, international regulations were completely rewritten. Ships were now required to carry enough lifeboats for every single person on board. 24-hour radio watch became mandatory, so a distress call could never again go unheard through the night. These changes came from an international agreement called SALAS, Safety of Life at Sea, a framework still used by ships around the world today. What we know for certain is this. Titanic struck an iceberg on the night of April 14, 1912. It sank in the early hours of April 15. More than 1,500 people died, in one of the deadliest peacetime maritime disasters in history. What remains uncertain is harder to accept. We will likely never know exactly why the Californian did not respond faster. We will never know exactly how many lives might have been saved with different decisions made in those final hours. Some questions about that night have simply been lost to time, along with the ship itself, resting more than 3,800 meters below the surface of the Atlantic Ocean. Perhaps that is the real lesson of the Titanic. Not that a ship sank, but that confidence, when left unchecked, can be more dangerous than any iceberg. If a story like this pulled you in, there is another mystery from history waiting for you right here on this channel.